Hey guys, what's going on? Shaw here, and today we are going to waste no time and we're going to talk about the Blood Death Knight first impressions on Dragonflight beta and my kind of overall thoughts. Now, quick disclaimer is I'm horrible at Blood Death Knight. This is a tank that I haven't really played much of on live servers until probably last week, like seriously, and I'm really used to the tier set playstyle where it's like hard strike, hard strike, hard strike, hard strike, hard strike, and that rotation is definitely not how the tank is going to play anymore. So Blood Death Knight mains actually might be pretty excited for how the class plays. So I'm going to go over my build, my overall thoughts, and just really kind of geek out about Blood Death Knight over the next couple minutes or so. Let's dive in. All right, Blood Death Knight. What are my first impressions of the class? Now, while it doesn't do VDH or Prot Warrior damage currently on beta, it does have the potential to actually have pretty decent sustained like we're used to through a few different talent choices. Of course, the typical Blood Death Knight fashion, you have an insane amount of self-healing, you have an insane amount of cooldowns. They're giving us things like, we have Death Pack available, we have things like Pet Sack, we of course have Vamp, things like Bone Storm, of course we'll still have access to Purgatory if we want it, Icebound Fortitude, Rune Tap, AMS, AMZ, just Dancing Rune Weapon, the whole shebang. You have so many cooldowns available, so the class, of course, this is hero content, so it really doesn't matter as much. It's pretty easy to live, but you have a very good defensive toolkit. We're having on-demand healing things like Consumption come back. Dancing Rune Weapon in pair with like Death Strike is just phenomenal. So all in all, really good feeling when it comes to survivability and the damage component. The biggest concern I think most DK players will have is how does it feel having low haste? My character currently has a whopping 8% haste, which is, yeah, super low. But have no fear. The Death Knight actually feels extremely fluid to play because we have a few cool options. And let me talk about my build really quick. Now again, disclaimer, I am not a DK main, so my tree might be completely bonkers. But that's okay. Let's talk about the base tree really quick. You're going to see a lot of cool options down the middle of the tree. And as you kind of build out either Frost or Unholy, you're either going to be able to get a little bit of like DRs and CC from the Frost side of the tree. And it seems like you're going to get a fair bit of damage from the Unholy side of the tree, as well as a couple different like unique defensive. So for me personally, I went down the center because that seems to be the most kind of direct route towards the bottom, and then from the bottom of the tree you can kind of branch out to kind of get any of the capstones you want, whether it's Soul Reaper, whether it's Abomination Limb, or whether it's Empower Rune Weapon. I'm sure there might be more successful builds going down either the left or right side of the tree and kind of skipping over the middle if you don't need it. But things like Asphyxiate, things like Death Pact, of course Wraithwalk being a mobility for the Death Knight is insanely fun, especially because you can't get slowed while you're Wraithwalking, so a very nice way to kind of blast through a dungeon. And then towards the bottom of the tree, of course, I'd wanted to pick up Abomination Limb because it's an extremely fun way to deal damage, to grip mobs in outside of Gorfiend's Grasp and Death Grip. It generates Bone Shield charges, which obviously is super helpful. And then Empower Rune Weapon, I thought was an interesting choice because it gives you that haste when you need it. On that 2-minute cooldown, it generates a rune, it gives you runic power instantly, and then it's going to then generate you runic power during the cooldown and every 5 seconds after that for 20 full seconds. So it pretty much fully fills up your runes if you have them depleted over those 20 seconds, and it's going to passively generate you runic power. It feels like a mini version of Swarming Mists from the Venthyr Covenant, but of course not really, but really fun. Very cool ability to help replenish your bar. So this in pair with Abomination Limb, it's very easy to keep up your Bone Shield charges and kind of fulfill that very cool Death Knight aesthetic. Let's jump over to the main tree really quick as well before I kind of talk about how it feels in dungeons. There's not a lot of options at the start of the tree. You kind of have to go down either side to fill out, but what I really enjoy is that Death's Caress was slightly reworked. It now generates 2 Bone Shield charges for the price of 1 rune, which I'm not sure is a big problem. It obviously makes more sense now to just Death's Caress if you want to accurately just generate 2 Bone Shards for 1 rune compared to generating 3 Bone Shield charges for 1 rune. But I found that using Marrow Rend, of course, with like things like Dancing Rune Weapon will replicate that and just instantly fill up your Bone Shield charges all the way up to like 9 or 10, depending on how many stacks you already have. And then, of course, once you kind of get down to the center of the tree, you're going to see the Dancing Rune Weapon, the Insatiable Blade, which is the Crimson Rune Weapon from Shadowlands, which, of course, it generates 5 Bone Shield charges immediately upon using, which is an easy way to get into that 5+, which means your Death Strike will cost less. And then every time a shard is consumed, it's going to reduce the cooldown by 5 seconds, which of course is incredible. And of course, Everlasting Bond was brought from the tier set into the tree, giving you a second copy of the rune weapon, as well as increasing its duration by 8 seconds. So very, very cool. Now, while you can have decent dancing rune weapon uptime currently in beta, it's not permanent. So which means that we're not hard strike spamming to consistently keep the buff up as long as possible. So the rotation becomes a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more interesting, going between, you know, mirror rend to hard striking. Your blood boiling, it feels like a little bit more often. Obviously making sure you have death and decay active, death caressing to also generate charges, and just really getting to actually use the toolkit that the class has. So all in all, feels very great. Now, the damage component mostly is going to come from using things like Tombstone, which has synergy with both the Dancing Rune Weapon CDR, as well as this new talent called Shattering Bone, which is when a bone shield is consumed, it shatters, doing shatter damage to all nearby enemies, and it's going to be tripled while you're inside of your Death and Decay, which it just, if you can play this right, which I haven't yet because I've only done like 2 or 3 dungeons on, feels really, really good. And of course, then you can play into Bone Storm, which is an easy way to dump really insane amount of runic power. Now, I understand that I think in higher level content, once we start seeing like Mythic Plus, I don't think Bone Storm might be the play because of the way it's capped. It has like capped healing as well. More than likely, we're going to try to get down to Purgatory, but until that happens, this is kind of the build that I've been running for damage, and man, does it feel good. There are a lot of AoE pulls, especially if you're properly playing around the Shattering Bone talents. You're going to be sustaining like 30, 40, even maybe upwards of 50k on a good Blood Death Knight to be able to do this. I also picked up a talent called Consumption. Consumption, man, this was the, I think if I'm not mistaken, it was the Legion artifact weapon. It's a 30-second CD that will do damage, and it heals you for the, you know, the damage that's done. Now, what's really cool about this is that it actually is replicated with the Everlasting Bond and the Dancing Rune Weapon. So if you have Dancing Rune Weapon up and you hit this button, it is a lay on hands, full heal, giga cleave, and it's really fun to hit. Now, while Consumption doesn't do the most amount of damage, it's kind of fun just to lash out and do this massive frontal without relying on runes or runic power. It's like a free AoE death strike, and it's insane. It's so fun. All in all, very fun class. It's pretty fluid to play. On a target dummy, I don't think I'll be doing that much damage, and again, like, my rotation might be pretty sus, but like Death's Caress, I already have 2 Bone Shield charges, which is awesome. So we can go in here, and we can of course summon our Dancing Rune Weapon, and we can actually just go right into the Empowered Rune Weapon as well, and we can just start kind of laying on this guy. And then if we use our Tombstone, it's going to actually then drop those stacks that we generated to do a little bit of burst damage. So if I go to current segment maybe, while I'm not doing the most insane amount of AoE or single targets, the class just feels very fluid. Generating a lot of runic power. Of course, you have a couple different CDs like Abomination, Limb, and Bone Storm. So the class just feels fun. It feels fluid. It doesn't really rely on the haste currently at this level. While you have Bone Shield charges active, you also gain 10% haste, which is kind of helpful. I'm right now sitting at almost 20%, so the class isn't dead in the water yet. I'm not really sure. Again, I'm not a Blood DK main, so I don't know if they can maybe, you know, buff anything when it comes to damage, but it just seems to be in a pretty good spot. So yeah, that is my first impressions of Blood Death Knight. The dungeons were pretty fun that I ran. Having things like Death Grip, Abomination Limb, and Gore Fiends is just really fun. You have things like Asphyxiate. Just it feels like Blood Death Knight again. It feels like this very kind of sporadic, kind of chaotic tank, and it's great. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please hit that like and sub button. I do stream on Twitch most days, and I've been doing a lot of beta content lately, of course. So if you want to see me do this stuff live, check me out there. Also, huge shout out to my Patreons. Again, without your guys' support, I really couldn't be doing this. So I genuinely can't thank you guys enough. All right, hope you guys are staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care.